Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Elliot Gerson from the Aspen Institute, and it is our great pleasure to begin our conversations this morning. We have a very large panel this morning with 5 incredibly distinguished panelists. Given the size and the fact that you all have wonderful biographical information in your packages, I am not going to go into any length about their backgrounds. But I will simply introduce them, then introduce our important topic, and then begin a conversation with them. I think, again, because we have so many people on the stage with me, that I'll probably have a conversation, a question or two with each of them before I move on. And then I hope, just as yesterday, that we'll have plenty of opportunity for audience participation. Our panelists, starting to my immediate right, Dr. Rafic Makki, who's the Executive Director of Strategic Affairs of the Abu Dhabi Education Council. Dr. John Sexton, President of New York University. The one biographical bit of information I'll mention is that John and I were actually co-clerks together many, many years ago. So we go back a long way, and it's a great personal pleasure to share this stage with John. Leonard Schlesinger, who's president of Babson College, Dr. Fred Moavenzadeh, the president of the Masdar Institute of Science and Technology, and His Excellency Dr. Sulaiman Jassim, who's the vice president of Zayed University. Our topic this morning is learning ecosystems, education as a building block for innovation. And I think as we look back at our conversations yesterday, if there has been a central thread through almost all of the panel discussions, it has been the importance of education. Education as the fundamental building block to create a knowledge-based economy, a thriving, innovative economy, and expanding opportunities for all. A necessary prerequisite, but not one that's independently adequate. It also seems to me that, especially coming from the United States, that there is a certain irony in coming here to talk about education, and for a number of reasons. Education, particularly public education, was what built the American economy in the 20th century. Without the extraordinary success of the American public education system, the United States would not have had the dominant position it had in the last century in many ways, and not just economic. But tragically, our education system in the United States now is failing in many respects. And if we were having a conversation like this in the United States, it would be about the failures and what we can do about it. And it's exciting to be coming to a country that's looking at education almost with a clean slate, learning lessons from around the world and building something that is sustainable. And the problem in the United States is not just in K through 12 education, which is presumably, and we'll hear from Dr. Makki about this, not one of the countries that you benchmarked, as the United States used to be first, and now we're 30th, 40th in many ways. It's not that in the United States we don't know what to do to improve K through 12 education, but for whatever reasons, our political system is now so broken that it's very frustrating and almost impossible to get the kind of reforms we need. But even in higher education in the United States, which we have taken for granted for many years has been the best in the world, there are new challenges, most of those challenges relating, frankly, to the globalization of higher education and the enormous successes achieved by overseas universities. And one of the things that's incredibly interesting, and we'll probably talk about this, and we have Presidents Sexton and Schlesinger here, is that some universities, including theirs, have recognized the importance of globalization and have improved their presence in the United States by ventures just as we have here. So we certainly don't have lessons to give the UAE. Indeed, I think we can learn a great deal from what is happening here. The extraordinary thing, too, is just how far the UAE has come, again, from the perspective of an outsider interested in education. in adult literacy, for example, as recently as 1975, just 54% of men and 31% of women were literate, whereas today it's over 90%. But of course, what we're talking about in these conferences is far more than literacy. It's really knowledge, and the kind of knowledge that can affect change and innovation. Zayed University, which we'll be hearing about, was established just in 1998. The Abu Dhabi Education Council in 2005, and the Masdar Institute for Science and Technology, 2009, and you've already heard yesterday how Dr. Sexton just began his first classes this month. So things have moved very, very quickly. And the other thing that is remarkable, among many others, is how Abu Dhabi has looked around the world for examples as to how to build the most sustainable infrastructure for educational accomplishment. It's benchmarked against other countries, and Rafic is going to be talking about this as we begin our discussion. In K through 12, looking at places that have really excelled, places like Finland or South Korea or Singapore. In higher education, looking at examples that are really extraordinarily successful. And a sector that we often and may not get a chance to talk about today, but that's incredibly important, is the vocational and technical training sector. And Abu Dhabi has also learned from the best examples of that, such as Germany. And the final thing I just want to say by introduction, again, just out of frankly, awe at what is going on here in terms of global vision of education, is to note that this is not the first example in the history of international education of countries bringing students to a hub from all corners of the world. When you think about higher education, some of the best early examples in the world of this were actually in the 12th century Renaissance and the universities of Paris and Bologna. In Paris, students came from all over Europe. In Bologna, they came from even further, and those really were the hubs of intellectual activity in the world. Oxford and Cambridge, also in the 12th century. In the 19th century, it was Germany that played that kind of a role, particularly in Berlin. And after World War II in the last century, it was the United States that played this role. And I think the vision of some of the gentlemen that you'll be hearing from today really are putting Abu Dhabi, and I don't think this is presumptuous to say, in a very similar kind of role and position as those extraordinary Renaissance institutions in our history. But let's begin directly with someone I hope I won't embarrass you, Rafic, to say I view you almost as one of the architects of this grand design, as the executive director of the Office of Planning and Strategic Affairs of the Education Council. And let me just start with the Abu Dhabi 2030 economic vision. And central to that vision was this notion of a knowledge-based economy. And how, just describe what that vision was, and then we can talk a little bit about how you developed that plan.
Certainly, thank you, Elliot. By the way, Elliot told me that I can take my time answering his question. He said, feel free to take as much as 1 minute. Most people, when they think about the 2030 socioeconomic vision, they think about it from an economic standpoint. The notion of diversifying the economy so that a greater percentage of the GDP comes from sectors that do not include oil and gas. However, there's another side to the 2030 socioeconomic vision, and that side reflects Abu Dhabi's true aspiration to really transform the Emirate into an oasis of culture, an oasis of intellect, one that values the pursuit of discovery and the production of knowledge. And so in the Abu Dhabi Education Council, we are very much driven by this vision on both the economic front and the cultural and intellectual front. And what we started out doing was to take a look at the 2030 socioeconomic vision, which has been articulated in a number of documents, including the policy agenda for Abu Dhabi, the 2030 economic vision for Abu Dhabi, and others. And what we started to do was to say, okay, we have this grandiose vision, and Abu Dhabi has followed up this vision by identifying specific priority area sectors which it wishes to focus on. So what we did in the Abu Dhabi Education Council was to start out by developing an education policy agenda that very much maps into the socioeconomic vision and the policy agenda of Abu Dhabi as an emirate. So we did that as a first step, and the education policy agenda served as an umbrella for everything else that we followed with. The policy agenda itself defined the objectives of the education system in alignment with the 2030 vision. It defined both intermediate outputs that are desired and long-term outputs. Intermediate outputs as measured by labor market indicators, as measured by other indicators that include some knowledge production in terms of research, and long-term outputs that are measured by socioeconomic gains at the emirate level. And we took this policy agenda, and then we developed strategic plans for each of the sectors of the education in Abu Dhabi. So we developed strategic plans for the P12 sector, P standing for pre-primary, 12 for grade 12. We developed strategic plan for vocational education, and we developed strategic plan for higher education. And the three plans come together in a very nice way under the education policy agenda. And the plans addressed some very serious challenges. You say that the United States has some serious challenges. It does have some serious challenges. And sometimes it's not fair to compare the United States on tests like PISA and TIMSS, which is almost a continent that is serving an extremely diverse population, to a small country like Finland, for example. So there are great pockets of excellence that we aspire to in Abu Dhabi in terms of the United States. So what we did was to identify our challenges, and we spent literally months collecting data on exactly where we are. We knew that the output of our P12 system is not exactly what we wanted, that the vast majority of our students coming out of high school are not qualifying for direct entry into college, that they require remedial programs. In fact, the federal institutions, Zayed University, UE University, and HCT, were spending as much as a third of their budget preparing students to enter higher education because the P12 system was not doing that. So we knew we had some key problems on the output side. So we went back and started looking at the input side. So we looked at the quality of our teachers. We looked at our curriculum. We looked at our facilities. And we concluded that our education system, our P12 education system, was in crisis. And to some degree, it still is. And so we then looked at benchmarks from around the world. We looked at Finland, we looked at Singapore, we looked at South Korea, we looked at the US, we looked at Ireland and others. We also looked at bad benchmarks. So we looked at countries that had reforms but didn't quite achieve what they wanted to achieve, to try to learn from not only good benchmarks but bad benchmarks. And then we, based on that, by identifying our challenges, knowing exactly where we are, we formulated our strategies, we identified our initiatives, we put 5- and 10-year targets and annual key performance indicators. We did that for P12, we did that for higher education, and we did that for vocational education. And I'll just stop here, and I can explain more in terms of detail how we plan to build the research infrastructure, for example, to help drive a knowledge-based economy later on.
Let's just stay on one aspect of that, because the other gentlemen are all involved primarily in higher education. So let's just stay with P through 12 for a minute. One can have the best higher educational system in the world, but if the P through 12 system isn't working, you're not going to reach where your targets. And what you said there are many challenges. Among the challenges, I assume, were rote learning and the difficulty of getting children to think truly critically. And what are you doing about that? I mean, because if students are prepared only to regurgitate, if you will, what they are given, which has been a traditional problem for many other countries as well, they're never going to be able to think outside the box, and some of the other concepts we've been learning about and talking about in terms of innovation. So what are you doing in P through 12 to assure that the students, when they reach the universities and institutions represented here, are going to have that critical perspective that's essential to real thought?
Yeah. Going back 2 years, when we looked at the challenges in P12, we can only make one conclusion, that we have some serious foundational problems, especially in the public sector in P12 education. And among the challenges that we have is exactly what you talked about, rote learning, the notion that the teacher is the center of the education process. We had problems with the qualifications of our teachers, the quality of our principals, the quality of our vice principals. We had serious problems with the curriculum itself, outdated curricula. So what we felt we needed to do was to completely overhaul the P12 system in Abu Dhabi. We didn't think that we could glue this together. We didn't think that we can borrow something from here, borrow something from here, there, bring some, do some partnerships in this area, some partnerships in that area. We didn't think that would do it. We needed a major overhaul of the education system. While we were about to implement this major overhaul of the education system, we felt that we needed to also apply some measures to address the immediate imperatives of the students who will be graduating while we are putting in the reforms. So the reforms were going to take 6 to 10 years. And while we're doing that, roughly 70,000 students would have graduated and would have missed out on these reforms. So we couldn't just let that happen. This is half a generation, and this is a sizable number given the population of Abu Dhabi. So we needed to do something special for them. So we had a long-term strategy to overhaul the education system, and we had a short-term strategy to deal with the needs of the graduating students. For the long-term strategy, we developed a new school model. This is a comprehensive model covering every aspect of the school from A to Z. It covers the kinds of teachers we want, the kinds of principals we need. It covers the facilities that are needed. It covers the curriculum, the pedagogy, a complete model for the school. And then we decided to apply this model starting at the lower levels, starting in KG. So beginning this year, the 2010-11 academic year, we are implementing the new school model in KG to grade 3. So that's 5 grades altogether. Now the new school model is biliterate. The student...
And biliterate, you mean
English
both
and Arabic.
and English.
Yes.
And actually not just learning English in an English class, but also using English in math and science
Math,
classes.
science, and technology in English. Civics, Islamic studies,
In Arabic.
history, geography in Arabic, yes. And so this new school model is being implemented right now in KG to grade 3. And we have completely cleaned house. And when we talked about overhauling the education system, we talked about ensuring that every teacher in the classroom is qualified, that every principal meets the minimum standards that the Abu Dhabi Education Council has set, that the pedagogy is such that the student is the center of the learning process, that we move away from the book as the single source of education in the classroom, to utilizing technology, to utilize information on the web and elsewhere. While we're implementing this, we're also addressing the needs of the students in high school that are graduating. We have extended the length of the school day by 2 periods, and we have focused these 2 periods on 2 things that we feel are needed for these kids. One is problem-solving skills, and the other one is language skills, communication skills. So by focusing on these 2 that are needed, no matter what kind of major you will pursue later on, whether you do business or law or engineering, you need those 2 skills. By focusing on these 2 skills for the students that are about to graduate, we feel we can give them the best that we can in the short period that we have.
I think we may want to bring you back to become the superintendent of schools in Washington, D.C. We just, we just lost our superintendent. Let's move to His Excellency, Dr. Sulaiman Al-Jassim. And ladies and gentlemen, he is elected to speak in Arabic, so you may, if you need the device to use that here in a minute. Vice President of Zayed University. I believe that there are approximately 5,000 Emirati students in the university. And I'd like to begin by asking, how does Zayed University, as well as the other universities in the UAE federal system of higher education, cultivate this culture of creativity and risk-taking that you just heard Rafic speak about, that he hopes the students who are entering your university will have? How do you cultivate that at the federal universities?
أرحب بسعادة السفير يوسف وأشكره على اهتمامه في متابعة تنفيذ هذا التجمع. نحن في هذا التجمع سنستفيد الكثير من المداخلات التي ستحصل من خلال زملائي المشاركين في هذه الندوة، وأيضا جيد أن نستقبل أعداد كبيرة من الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية ومن الخارج يستفيدوا ويتعلموا أيضا من التجارب الناجحة الموجودة عندنا في الإمارات. أنا سأتحدث عن 3 مؤسسات: عن جامعة الإمارات العربية المتحدة التي أسست سنة 1977، عن كليات التقنية العليا التي أسست سنة 1988، وعن جامعة زايد التي أسست سنة 1998. إجمالي طلبة فيها 3 مؤسسات تقريبا 36,000 طالب. هذه المؤسسات الثلاث خرجت حتى الآن قرابة ما يزيد عن 100,000 خريج، والآن ماسكين في مراكز قيادية في دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة. الإمارات شهدت نهضة سريعة خلال السنوات الأخيرة، وهذا يتطلب أن يكون هناك موارد بشرية تستطيع أن تدير وتشغل التنمية هذه بكفاءة عالية. نحن نحاول أن نحافظ على التنوع أيضا في اقتصادنا من خلال برامج تعليمية أيضا متطورة تطرحها مؤسسات التعليم العالي في الدولة. ونحن أيضا بتوجيهات القيادة نساهم في إيجاد أيضا بدائل للمصادر وتنويع مصادر الدولة. معالي الشيخ نيان وزير التعليم العالي والبحث العلمي يملك رؤية ثاقبة ومتطورة في التعليم، ومنذ أن مسك وزارة التعليم العالي أشرف على وضع استراتيجيات خاصة لمؤسسات التعليم العالي الثلاثة: جامعة الإمارات، كلية التقنية العليا، وجامعة زايد، أن تكون هذه المؤسسات على مستوى عالمي. أيضا نواكب التطور اللي قاعد يحصل في العالم، ونستمر أيضا في التغيير في تطوير مناهجنا التعليمي يتماشى مع هذا التطور العالمي. وأيضا حرص على أن نشجع الابتكار والإبداع والخلق والتغيير أيضا في برامجنا التعليمية، وأيضا نشجع العمل الحر لمعظم طلابنا من خلال البرامج التعليمية ومشاريع التخرج التي يقوم بها الطلاب في مشاريعهم في الجامعات. أسسنا أيضا مراكز ابتكار موجودة في جامعات الإمارات وفي كليات التقنية العليا وفي جامعة زايد، وهذه المراكز تساعد الطلاب على القيام بمشاريع. نحن مثلا في جامعة زايد عندنا في نهاية العام الدراسي كابستونز للطلاب، وهذه المشاريع أيضا فيها من الخلق والإبداع والابتكار تصلح لأن تكون مشاريع أيضا تجارية ناجحة، وكثير من المشاريع التي قاموا بها الطالبات أصبحت مشاريع تجارية ناجحة. هناك منح أيضا واعتمادات مالية موجودة في مؤسسات التعليم العالي لتشجيع الطلاب على القيام بالعمل الحر. وأنشئت في الإمارات بتوجيه معالي الشيخ نيان NRF National Research Foundation، وهذه National Research Foundation تجمع 3 مؤسسات من جامعة الإمارات، كلية التقنية العليا وجامعة زايد. كل مؤسسة تعليمية فيها تخصص معين، مثل الآداب في جامعة زايد، التكنولوجي في كلية التقنية العليا، الساينس في جامعة الإمارات. ونستفيد من الخبراء والدكاترة الموجودين في هذه المراكز الثلاثة للقيام بهذه المشاريع. ونتمنى إن شاء الله أن نبدأ قريبا ببحوث مشاريع عندما توفر إن شاء الله الاحتمالات المالية القريبة إن شاء الله. نحن نحاول أن نرسخ أيضا الأهداف والمشاريع الوطنية في برامجنا بحيث تتماشى هذه الأهداف والمشاريع مع أهداف الدولة. الرؤية الحكومة الاتحادية سنة 2021، رؤية حكومة أبو ظبي اللي سنة 2030، ورؤية واستراتيجية حكومة دبي 2015، كلها تصب في العمل الوطني وفي التنمية الوطنية، وأيضا وجانب كبير منها أيضا يأخذ اهتمام في التعليم. نحن مؤسسات التعليم العالي كلنا نعمل بشراكة وأيضا لنخدم هذه الأهداف والاستراتيجيات والرؤى الوطنية الجديدة في الإمارات. يوم أمس معالي الشيخ نيان تحدث في مركز الإمارات للدراسات الاستراتيجية عن التعليم وضرورة تطوير التعليم، وتكلم على أن أكثر من نصف عدد السكان المواطنين في الإمارات تقل أعمارهم عن 15 سنة، وهؤلاء يمثلوا أيضا مورد مهم جدا مستقبلي للإمارات. كيف نستطيع أن نبدأ من الآن في تطوير هذا المورد ونخلق منه عنصر مهم جدا لتطوير الدولة. بلغ نظامنا التعليمي مثل ما ذكر الشيخ نيان مرحلة من النضج، وهذا يستدعي أيضا أن احنا نبدأ ب أن نركز على الجودة في نظامنا التعليمي. لذلك شراكاتنا مع كثير من المؤسسات التعليمية العالمية، جامعة الإمارات، كليات التقنية العليا، والجامعة زايد، معظم برامجنا التعليمية شراكات مع أفضل المؤسسات العالمية، وهذا ما يعني يدعو له معالي الشيخ نيان. نحن قيادتنا عندها الاستعداد وعندها الرؤى في التغيير والتطوير، والمجتمع تفهم ضرورة التغيير والتطوير، ونبدأ بالتعليم كمؤسسة لخلق هذا التغيير في مجتمع الإمارات. نسعى أن تكون مخرجاتنا التعليمية في الطليعة أفضل خريجين على مستوى العالم، ونحن ندعم أيضا الابتكار، وأيضا ندعم الاقتصاد الوطني، وأيضا ننوع ونساهم في تنويع مصادر الدخل. هناك مساحة متوفرة في مؤسسات التعليم العالي لتوفير مناخ والأدوات والتوجيه والبيئة المناسبة والرعاية للخلق والابتكار في مؤسساتنا التعليمية. نحن نتمنى إن شاء الله أن نساهم بالشراكة مع زملائنا في الجامعات الموجودة في أبو ظبي وفي الإمارات بصفة عامة، على أن نكون جامعات عظيمة لمدينة عظيمة.
Tell us how you think about the debate that exists between focusing on technical skills and or liberal arts, and how in your universities do you find the right balance between these two focuses, liberal arts on the one hand and technical professional skills on the other?
المعرفة لها مصادر متعددة. الناس تتعلم المعرفة من التاريخ، المعرفة من المجتمع، المعرفة من المواد العلمية التي تدرس في مؤسسات التعليمية، الثقافة المجتمعية. نحن نحرص على أن يكون طلابنا قادة ويكتسبوا الثقة بالنفس، الاعتماد على النفس، المبادرة وتحمل المسؤولية. نحن نحضر أبنائنا على أن يكونوا مستعدين لمواجهة التحديات العالمية. نحن نعيش في عالم متغير سريع، تطور مستمر، فلذلك نسعى من خلال المؤسسات التعليمية أن نسلح أبنائنا بالمعرفة والعلم والثقة بالنفس. سياسة واستراتيجيات وزارة التعليم العالي ومؤسسات التعليم العالي أيضا أن نحافظ على هويتنا الوطنية. نحن في مجتمع خليط من السكان، ثقافات متعددة، أديان متعددة. احنا كيف نستطيع أن نخلق هذا الفرد المواطن خريج مؤسسات التعليم العالي عنده الثقة بالنفس، احترام ثقافات الآخرين، احترام ألوان باللون، لا فرق بين اللون والدين والجنس والثقافة. نحن نتعامل كلنا في كمؤسسة نخدم بعضنا البعض، وأيضا نحضر أبنائنا أن يكونوا مواطنين عالميين، ليس فقط إماراتيين أو عرب أو مسلمين. يجب أن ننطلق إلى العالمية، وهذا من أهداف معالي الشيخ نهيان، أن يكون الخريج يتمتع بها الثقافة العالمية، التواصل مع الآخرين، احترام ثقافات الآخرين، احترام قيم الآخرين، احترام معتقدات الآخرين أيضا يعني. وهذا اللي نجحنا فيه الحمد لله الآن، وحتى الآن هذا التواصل والانسجام اللي حاصل في سكان الإمارات الآن أعتقد، وتفهم قيادة الرشيد، توجيه قيادة الرشيد أن يكون أن نحترم ثقافات الآخرين ونوجد توازن في علاقتنا أيضا مع الآخرين. اكتساب المهارات للطلاب جدا ضرورية ومهمة، نحن نسعى إلى تحقيقها أيضا، ونحاول أن نشجع الطلاب على التفوق والاهتمام بالجانب العلمي بجانب الجانب الأدبي أيضا يعني. لأن نحن نعيش الآن في عالم يعيش عصر التكنولوجيا وعصر التطور والتقنيات والنانو تكنولوجي الآن، فنحن نحرص على أن يكون أبنائنا أيضا يعني متسلحين بهذا الجانب، بجانب أيضا الرجوع إلى ثقافتنا الوطنية وتراثنا. ما هو التوازن الصحيح؟ أعتقد هذا يرجع إلى كل طالب، لا نستطيع أن نقيس أن هذا أفضل من هذا أو هذا الكمية أكثر من هذا، لأن أعتقد يعني هاي تعتمد على إمكانيات وكفاءات الطلاب، ولكن أعتقد أن التوازن ضروري أيضا في هذا الجانب.
Thank you very much. Let's move now to Dr. Moavenzadeh of the Masdar Institute of Science and Technology. I see the Masdar Institute as responding to one of the challenges that Rafic referred to earlier, and that's part of the long-range planning as well, which is even with the expansions in higher education, there was a deficit in this country of research, of true research, basic and applied research, which we've seen and discussed is so important to creating an innovative economy. Can you just tell us something about the vision and mission of the Masdar Institute and how that responds to that particular deficiency in the UAE educational apparatus?
Yes. Let me first welcome our guests from abroad to Abu Dhabi. And Masdar Institute was established primarily to serve some of the visions that the leadership of Abu Dhabi has had developed over the past 40 years. And those of you that are familiar with Sheikh Zayed's statements, the founding father of the country, notice that there are several issues that he has raised in his statements. And 4 of them that are very relevant to the vision of Masdar Institute is on the issue of environment, that he was extremely concerned with the preservation of environment. And these statements are 30, 40 years old. It's not today. The second one was on diversifying the economy away from oil. And again, that is about 30-some years old. The third one was on education. And he genuinely believed and has said in many occasions that education is the only asset. Educated people, the only asset that the country has. And finally, the fourth one that I believe is extremely important and was basis for the formation of Zayed University and others, is the role of women in the society. and he's very clear that the women should have equal role in the development of this society. The new leadership of the country has picked up those as a mission for Abu Dhabi as a whole, and has tried to develop a diversification of the economy, high emphasis on education, and respect for the environment by trying to get into other sources of energy, especially renewable energy. Just like United States, when Kennedy decided to put a man on the moon and formed NASA and gave NASA the responsibility to do whatever it takes to put the man on the moon, Abu Dhabi leadership formed the company that is called Masdar. The Masdar was given the responsibility to achieve those objectives. And Masdar has taken, similar to NASA, a very holistic view of the system, which includes human resource development, R&D, venture capital, startups, collaboration with multinational corporations, development of, for example, Zayed Prize, having the Future Energy Conference in Abu Dhabi that attracts 10 or 15,000 people annually. And finally, bringing in international organizations like IRENA into Abu Dhabi. Masdar Institute addresses the first two of those, human resource development and R&D. And in here, our focus is primarily on renewable and sustainable technologies. We call it green technology, sustainable technologies, renewable energy, water, environment. And therefore, its mission fits perfectly into the system. The previous speakers had mentioned with regard to the importance of the culture, importance of diversity. But I also like to add to that a compelling economic argument for the development of this human resource in Abu Dhabi. I have worked for over 30 years in the developmental issue, and all over the world, the primary concern was that most of the country, almost all of them, where there was a scarcity of capital and abundance of labor. And therefore, the primary concern of economic development was how to use that scarce capital efficiently to generate employment for large masses of labor. In here, we are completely the opposite of it. There is, by and large, abundance of capital, but tremendous shortage of manpower. So the question now is, how do you use that scarce manpower efficiently to serve that economy? And here comes the role of education. And here comes the role of not only all the aspects of it, but our focus has been on the very top end of it. How do you develop individuals here that are educated and motivated to go and develop new ideas and provide opportunity for those ideas to get into the marketplace? So this is where we come in. What you see is that the Masdar Institute, it is a graduate school, does not have any undergraduate program. We require 50% of the time of students and better than 50% of the time of our faculty to be spent on research. And if time allows, I will give you some examples of what I mean by 50% of the time and what I mean by R&D and how Masdar Institute is structured. But we practice what we preach. We have developed large number of research projects. We just moved into our new building which is environmentally one of the most sophisticated buildings that I have ever seen. And I welcome those of you who are interested in coming and visiting, but don't expect the lights work all the time, and don't expect the faucets work all the time. But it is, some of our students' blogs had identified it as a spaceship in the middle of desert, and which is truly a spaceship. And so it is a very, very challenging, very exciting, and we are looking to participate in the vision and the mission of the leadership of the country. And hopefully we will have some other opportunities to tell you more about where we are heading for.
Thank you, Fred. And my understanding is that you've had a tremendous degree of cooperation from MIT in the establishment of this. And we'll be talking about partnerships in some of the rest of the conversation this morning. Can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with MIT, your partnership with them, and what their contribution is to that vision?
MIT, when was approached, we were approached to establish a branch over here. And we sort of looked around. MIT does not establish this branch anywhere. So we convinced them that we will work with them in the development of the university, but the university belongs to them. And when we looked at it, we saw that in this region, there are experimentation with variety of models that are being developed for higher education. And each have some advantages and some disadvantages. If you look, for example, Zayed University, UAE University, these are publicly funded universities. And they do have also state universities that are funded by different Emirates. Then in addition to that, they have universities that are established by foreign institutions. Imperial College, New York University, Babson College. They do have their own footprints here, and they offer their own degrees. Then there are universities that are established here for profit, which is unfortunate because I don't see profitability in educational activities, but nevertheless, there are few that are working for profit. And finally, a private university, not for profit, not funded by the state, is the model that we are pursuing. And MIT provides know-how, advice, and support. In lieu of that, MIT participates in controlling the quality of the faculty and the quality of our students, in the sense that every faculty member that has been hired by Masdar Institute, which at present time we have around 45 of them, have to be approved by MIT. Approval means that the committee of faculty reviews and recommends whether this person is. In addition to that, that faculty member has to spend up to 1 year at MIT, working with MIT counterparts and attending some courses. Ironically, the quality of some of these individuals were so high that many of them taught courses rather than taking courses. And then they come over here, they continue their research activities with MIT for at least a year, and many of them now are on the second year of their collaborations. In terms of quality of students, we did the same thing. MIT said that they do have a right to review the applications. So at random, we send them applications, and they review and they approve. The standards what we have established in terms of GRE, in terms of TOEFL, in terms of QM averages are exactly the same as MIT. And since the university offers a free education, students are fully supported. Therefore, the first year we received 1,400 applications, of which 400 qualified, and we chose only 100. The second year, we received over 2,000 applications, of which, again, 400 or 500 qualified, and we chose only about 100 of them. So that is the role that MIT plays. Our academic programs are developed in consultation with MIT. Our research agenda is developed in consultation with MIT. But I have to remind you that MIT's role is primarily advisory. Does not have an authority or responsibility here. The authority and responsibility rests with us. And therefore, we make the decisions in consultation with them. For the past 4 years that we have been working at MIT, I was on that side, now I'm on this side, we have had no issue that really has had to come to a vote, even though we have executive committees, joint executive committees that has to approve all the budgetary matters, all the programs, all the activities. So far, it has worked primarily on the consensus. This is what we like to do. Everybody puts its things, and then we gather that and make it present. So it's a very unique relationship and a very different model than many other universities. It also gives us opportunity for exchange of the faculty and the students. And the way that we do that is through developing complementary type of facilities. For example, our microscopy lab over here has the type of the microscopy equipment that does not exist at MIT. So our students who work on this, some of them go to MIT to do some of the work. Their student comes over here to do some of their work. So this is complementarity. We developed a class 100 clean room that is unique to this part of the world, and is not only attracting MIT to come over here, but many other universities to come and participate in the area of micro devices. So one more with regard to our research activities. We have adapted MIT's research strategy of what I call a sponsored research. A sponsored research is if somebody is willing to pay for that research. It has several advantages. One is that makes the faculty member responsible to be sure that there is a client outside who is willing to pay for it. And then he has to make a commitment that's realistic, something that he can deliver. The proposal, the contract includes the scope of the work, how you are going to do it, what you are going to deliver, when are you going to deliver, how much is it going to cost. And that is a contract that we sign with the industry. And therefore, we have to deliver that. The advantage of it to faculty is that it disciplines the research. Advantage of it to the sponsor is that see value in Masdar Institute. Advantage of it to the students are that they will see a job opportunity, and they are willing to go and work for these companies. The companies have 2 years to evaluate and assess these individuals. So it ties in very well. We have some emphasis on recruiting Emirati students. And we do have an office of outreach that reaches to these students. Zayed University has been extremely kind to us by having them the first year going through some fundamental courses, foundation program. And now we are admitting them to our program. Dr. Lamia Fawaz is sitting here. She's in charge of it. And I'm happy to say that the first year we had 10% Emirati. This year we have better than 35% Emiratis in our class. So the supply is there. It's just a matter of grabbing them and bringing them into stuff.
Thank you very much, Fred. You we'll move to John Sexton, and we'll talk about a very different model of higher education. Fred, you said that MIT does not establish branches. And I know, John, you bristle when your university here is referred to as a branch. you really have an entirely different vision, it seems to me, about what a global university could be. Indeed, you refer to something called the Global Network University. Just tell us what that vision is and what that architecture is, because it seems to me like it's really an entirely different animal from any other university I can think of.
Well, this is a conference on innovation, and I think folks that are here that may not be familiar with developments in higher education kind of get a peek at the future if you look through the lens of Abu Dhabi. So there's a wonderful way, the way you've orchestrated the panel, that you now come to the first, in a way, the first volitional actor. So I'm here in a way to give testimony on behalf of Abu Dhabi, and I give it with a Brooklyn accent, I mean.
Do we have translation for
yes,
us?
Well, this is something, Elliot and I go back 30 years together. When you work for the same judge for a couple of years together, you get to know each other's accents, so he can do the translation simultaneously. Let me be very clear about it. There was nothing that compelled NYU to be here. We freely chose. We're volitional. We're here. And now, why are we here? And that connects to your question very deeply, I think. First of all, as you've begun to see, this is a place, you've seen this over the last couple of days, and we've talked about this, some of us in the halls, where the conversation is, of course, much more candid. This is a place that is thinking strategically, and in a way that is now lost in the United States. It takes very seriously mission differentiation. And you should understand that the five of us on this panel are colleagues and collaborators. We don't see ourselves in a zero-sum game. We see ourselves as parts of a symphony orchestra. And one of the great things about, one of the reasons NYU's here is because this is a place that defines missions the way the Jesuits taught me to. Ratio studiorum. You're running a school, state the reason, gear everything you do to it. Second, it is one of the few places in the world that has a leadership that really sees higher education as a public good. And here I segue to a vision of the world, and actually John Cow caught it in his presentation when he got to his punchline last night. And he said if he was giving strategic advice to Abu Dhabi, what would he say? He would say become a node, an indispensable node in the global network that's emerging. So there's a vision here that puts together Friedman's flat world and Florida's spiky world, and says, interesting, you used the Renaissance and the universities in the Renaissance, that the world will operate, the creative, innovative class will operate beyond sovereignty, beyond these artificial boundaries that separate people and cause wars. That just as they moved among Milan and Venice and Florence and Rome, the creative class will move among Shanghai and Abu Dhabi and London and New York. And I think the effort here is to make sure that Abu Dhabi is in that first order of nodes. Now, John Hagel yesterday said, why an institution? Why? Well, I'll tell you why. Okay, universities, and this is why NYU is here, and it gets to your point about the architecture we're creating. Universities irreducibly depend on one thing: talent. Faculty talent, attracting student talent, doing the right thing together, creating ideas, and the advance of thought. And it is my intuition, shared by the folks here in Abu Dhabi, shared by the folks in the leadership at NYU, that a disproportionately high share of the most talented people in the world, faculty, students, and staff, in the coming decades will be, in the Greek sense of the word, the classic Greek sense of the word, cosmopolitans. And they will want a life for themselves and their families. This is my point of yesterday, fire and ice. They will want a life for themselves and their families that allows them to move fluidly through the world, the way ideas move through the world. And there's a way in which NYU is the first instantation of a university that says we'll create a university architecture which will give us, in a way, an architectural I'm not talking about buildings here, I'm talking about locations that will give us an advantage in recruiting talent, and will get us in all the conversations in the world, and will be a new version of a great university. There'll still be universities with sufficient magnetic power to attract people to Palo Alto or Cambridge or Princeton or even New Haven. But, and NYU has tremendous magnetic power. We have something called New York City, more Nobelists per capita than any city in the world. So we have magnetic power. But why rely only on that magnetic power? Abu Dhabi says, NYU says, if you can create a kind of Mobius strip that allows people to move fluidly through your system. And so we've very quickly, think of until a month ago, all the human capital had to enter NYU through New York. But we had created 16 study away sites on 6 continents, and our students could register for a continent as easily as they could register for a course. And these are NYU courses, and each site had a personality. So Prague is music and transition government, and Accra is global public health and economic development, and so forth and so on. So an undergraduate business student who was in the top quarter of the class would be entitled to do, with NYU professors, NYU courses, 5 semesters in New York, 1 in London, 1 in Shanghai, 1 in Abu Dhabi. It's a different kind of education now. And you could co-locate. You could have students doing a course in cities around the world. So now what happened a month ago.
But this is more than like in Accra, focused on global health. This is like Washington Square. This is, as you call it, a portal. This is to be a full
No, that's where
university.
I'm going. So as of a month ago, a second doorway opened.
Yeah, aha.
So now there are 2 doorways into the system. And we are not just creating in Abu Dhabi a full version of a university, and we've done 65 conferences already here in Abu Dhabi with the best of our faculty, bringing colleagues from around the world. And you know, I've been teaching a class here for 2 years because we want to connect to the rest of the system. So I have some of his students that run a national, and they get credit in his university for a course that I teach. And so we connect in, but what happened a month ago was an entering class as strong as the entering class of any university in the world. Kids that turned down Princeton and Baydar and Oxford chose to come to Abu Dhabi, even though our campus isn't yet built, because they were coming for each other. They were coming because people like David Levering Lewis in the second row, the only person ever to win the Pulitzer Prize for Volume 1 and Volume 2 of the same biography, is here to teach them, because the best of New York's faculty is here to teach them, as well as people we've recruited to be here all the time. They're coming for a quality of education that is without parallel, but most of all, they're coming for this cosmopolitan view, and because these students get the Mobius strip idea. Right. And they see themselves as creating global civil society, what John was speaking about in his talk yesterday, and Abu Dhabi has said the following, and essentially what the leadership here has done is something that I've seen only once before. And that, well, I guess you could say the land-grant colleges in a way did it earlier, but they moved away from it. But the City University of New York in the 1920s and 30s said to the citizens of New York, who really were the citizens of the world, because 40% of the citizens of New York come from other countries, said to those people, if you've got the smarts, we've got the education. Right through a doctorate. But you had to be from New York City. What Abu Dhabi, which wants to be part of the World Idea Network, has said is, wherever you are in the world, you know, if you're a young man who homeschooled himself in his tribal village in Ethiopia, who walked to our nominating high school in Addis Ababa and begged admission, who the school found out was living in a cardboard box, hadn't seen his family for 6 years, and yet was tops in the Ethiopian national exam. That kid is now studying for his BA degree with David Levering Lewis and Nobel-level scientists like David Chickatano and so forth and so on. So that's the concept, and so our role, NYU Abu Dhabi's specific role in this orchestra, is to magnetize talent from all around the world to come here to Abu Dhabi, at the very least learn about Abu Dhabi, go back to their countries, run their companies, and know about Abu Dhabi. Some of them will stay and energize Abu Dhabi. So that's our role in the symphony orchestra.
It's remarkable, and it is a different role in the orchestra. It's just thinking about this. The other institutions exist to provide primarily and by definition world-class education to people who are here. And it's as if the largest, I think NYU was the largest private university in the world.
We are.
It's in a sense, the largest private university is here in Abu Dhabi as a publicly funded university, but it's the only one I can think of in the world as a public university that seemingly has no in-state preference.
Well, okay, two things.
I mean, how many of the 150 are Emiratis?
Okay. So first, get this, okay? What you have here in Abu Dhabi is this extraordinary faculty. Research is going to begin soon, and so forth, and so on. You know, so Fabio Piano, the provost, is co-locating his lab on plant genomics in Washington Square and here. We've got Alec Morantz coming over to do linguistic neuroscience at the highest level because he'll have the best machine in the world built here because of the stability of the soil. We couldn't do it in New York because of the subways. So that's going on here, but the whole university is here. And it's here to bring us talent from around the world, but we also take seriously our connection to our sister institutions here and to the local community. So on Sunday last, I taught a class to the NYU Abu Dhabi students, but I also taught my class to the Sheikh Mohammed scholars, all of whom are Emirati and are getting their credit there. In the entering class this year, of the 148 students, 8 were Emirati. And I think we will play a special role at the very top, especially for women in this society.
So how many of the 8 are women?
7. And in my first class of Emirati students in the Sheikh Mohammed Scholars Program, which was done competitively, each of the schools nominated their people, 20 each, and then our faculty interviewed, like a Rhodes Scholarship interview. 14 of the 16 were women. Second year, we went to 20 students, 17 of the 20 were women, because by and large, the women here are spectacularly brilliant. They're driven. It was very interesting. It was a woman yesterday that asked the question about the indigenous talent here, and the men, for social reasons, are able to go overseas for school. So I think that we will play a special role, not that all of the women stay here, but we will play a special role in empowering women, which is of importance to me. And I would expect, because we're now beginning outreach programs with high schools and so forth, that you'll see the percentage of our entering class of Emirati move up. But we don't have a mandate for that. It'll be done on the merits. Our mandate is do it on the merits.
Well, I think that's actually what's remarkable about the vision.
It's part of what drew us here.
That a recognition that just having a world-class hub, regardless of how many Emirati might be attending it, and obviously it will increase
over time. It's not a hub. It's an organ in the system.
An organ.
I get this right.
The heart.
Okay.
The heart.
So I always had.
I could pick a different organ.
I always had to edit his work.
That's true. All right. That's right. That's true. All right. Well, we'll come back to John, and I'm sure the audience
will want to as well. You see how quickly he's moving
very
quickly?
Very, very quickly. Let's go to Babson College, because this is yet another example of remarkable degree of experimentation here in higher education. And tell us about this college that's focused on entrepreneurship. I mean, what could be more about what we've been talking about the last couple of days? And I don't know if there's anything like that anywhere. You call this an E-school as opposed to a B school? And is this the first E-school that's going to exist anywhere?
Well, I'm delighted to be here, certainly delighted to be working in Abu Dhabi and thrilled to be on this panel. And in great company with the Abu Dhabi schools and certainly with NYU and MIT support. And most of you probably don't know much about Babson. A small school 13 miles west of Boston, about 1,950 undergraduate students, about 1,500 MBAs, and it's a niche school. It is explicitly focused on entrepreneurship. It's part of the DNA, it's part of the heritage. And it results, quite honestly, in the dynamics of a higher education community in Wellesley, which is quite different than that which you'll find either in the normal business school or in the normal university. We define ourselves as an institution in two very simple ways. One is that we have a method, and that method is called entrepreneurial thought and action. It's rooted in Peter Drucker's notion in 1983 that says that entrepreneurship is the physical manifestation of innovation, and that it is a method, and it can be documented and can be codified, and consequently can be taught to virtually anybody in a variety of different forms. So we overtly reject the basic proposition that looks at entrepreneurial genotypes and discounts the focus of education and being able to build entrepreneurial capabilities. So that's number one. Number two is we broaden the perspective of entrepreneurial activity. So we define ourselves internally in the school and externally as the educator for entrepreneurship of all kinds. Entrepreneurship education, certainly in most American universities, has a very narrow perspective on just new venture creation. And our argument is actually quite simple, that the skills that are embedded in entrepreneurial activity can extend way beyond new venture creation. It can extend to the questions of growth. It can extend to the questions of being able to perpetuating multi-generational family enterprise. And most importantly, given the comments that came yesterday morning, it is one of the primary mechanisms to be able to address some of the great problems of civilization, whether it be our collection with our engineering partners in Wellesley and the National Academy of Engineering Grand Challenges competition, where we have multifunctional, multidiscipline teams working those activities, or any other large-scale problem that really lends itself to an entrepreneurial approach, largely because of the levels of uncertainty to the point of unknowability that are embedded in those particular problems, and the appropriateness of an entrepreneurial method for being able to demonstrate the capacity to take smart action in the face of the unknown. And in some respects, that is our core definition of entrepreneurial activity, recognizing full well all of the advantages that a traditional institution bring to the question of deep functional knowledge, but also recognize the severe limitations of most educational models that are predicated on the assumption of higher qualities of thought generating higher action. And we recognize the legitimacy of also recognizing the opportunity of generating action to be able to support new modes of thinking. The school in and of itself is probably one of the most physically diverse communities for a small college. 40% of our undergraduate student body are non-US passport holders from 67 countries, and over 50% at the graduate level. We've been in this entrepreneurship space largely as a result of the decisions of a number of predecessor leaders going back about 50 years. Our strategy, as opposed to John's, where they talk about the largest university that we are talking about there in NYU, our explicit strategy and our explicit words are, we don't want to be big. Okay? We simply do not want to be a big college. We just want to be connected to big things. And in the spirit of being connected to and a major partner in big things, what we have done, because of what we believe are some of the significant limitations of the higher education model in the United States, is created a not-for-profit subsidiary of Babson College called Babson Global that allows us to actually partner on a global scale without some of the traditional encumbrances of the American higher education model, whether it be about faculty dynamics or any other activity like that. And our faculty has been actively involved in the process of actually voting our ability to go to market on a broader scale internationally under a set of rules and a set of processes that are much more appropriate for the global education system than the traditional US model. That brings us to Abu Dhabi. Many people here over the last 2 days have said, well, what's Babson College doing in Abu Dhabi and what's going on? We're one of the great undiscovered secrets because we have a school that's under development. And my colleague from ADEC is here today, and we have a petition in and a set of applications in to the Abu Dhabi Educational Council, and then hopefully following approval from the Educational Council going to the Ministry of Higher Education to essentially support the Chamber of Commerce and the UAE Academy in the establishment of the Abu Dhabi School of Management and Entrepreneurship, what we aspire to actually be the first global school of entrepreneurship exclusively, and right here in Abu Dhabi. And what we're hoping to be able to do is admit our first class of students in the fall of 2011. This is part of a broader strategy under Babson Global that has us doing 4 very different but related things that are actually linked up to being able to have the impact and partnerships that allow us to have an impact much greater than what we can have simply in Wellesley. One is that we are actively in the process of co-designing schools. So in this case, the Abu Dhabi School of Management and Entrepreneurship is in fact a private, not-for-profit institution. We are actively involved much in the same way as MIT and Masdar in developing initial curriculum, in doing all of the initial faculty hiring, and in guiding the institution through a 10-year process to reach global accreditation by the highest order accreditation agencies. Our faculty will come back and forth as part of the equation, but the second part of our responsibility is to both recruit and train the best possible business and entrepreneurship faculty that could be available to work in this region. So not only to find that talent, but also to find younger talent and train them in a strikingly different way than those academics who have been in traditional institutions in this region in the past. And obviously, from our diagnostic, the faculty attraction and faculty development responsibility for us is in some respects our highest order responsibility. We've been involved in faculty development in the broader entrepreneurship space through something we call the Symposium for Entrepreneurship Educators for about 27 years, and now we've gravitated that and moved that into what we call the Global Consortia for Entrepreneurial Educators, which is a portfolio of 20 global institutions that have defined entrepreneurship as one of their key activities and have a desire to be sharing faculty expertise, curriculum expertise, and knowledge across this broad platform of entrepreneurship education and across the world. So we're also intervening in a variety of different ways in action research projects, both in the United States and overseas, to be able to realize the second part of the vision that was articulated yesterday, to support all of this tops-down planning and this tops-down strategy with a set of bottoms-up activities that are required to create a robust ecosystem. So in the first place, in the States and internationally, we partner with Goldman Sachs on 2 different initiatives called 10,000 Small Business and 10,000 Women. And those are both initiatives that go beyond the traditional college environment and begin to rely on community colleges and community activities in the US and globally to take existing businesses and break them through the threshold of a particular volume of sales or a particular volume of activity and get actively involved in demonstrating the power of entrepreneurial activities and growth activities to be able to stimulate job creation throughout the world. And that has been a $500 million commitment by Goldman Sachs in the United States to small business in urban distressed areas, and a $100 million commitment externally for women. Again, combine education with finance and with a local support ecosystem. Very, very exciting work that's very much in its infancy. And then finally, we have a set of action research projects that are explicitly focused on developing more robust entrepreneurial ecosystems in a variety of environments like Abu Dhabi, where there's an active commitment to being able to articulate and build that strategy. We work in the coffee region of Colombia, we work in Puerto Rico, and in a variety of different kind of activities like that. For the Abu Dhabi School of Management and Entrepreneurship, the agenda is actually very simple. One is to actually embed an educational model to stimulate that bottoms-up entrepreneurial activity. To do that initially with a primarily Emirati audience, and then to be able to extend those capabilities more broadly to applicants for the world. Number 2, to be able to establish this activity in Abu Dhabi as demonstrably a world-class capability. Not only to serve the growth objectives of Abu Dhabi, but to be widely regarded on a global scale as the place to go to actually learn how to do this work and to learn from others to be able to develop those capabilities. To then evolve the school into a broader set of activities at the center level aspirationally, where we can actually begin to intervene in K-12, recognizing full well the earlier conversation about the need to stimulate creative problem solving, the need to stimulate productive entrepreneurial activity at a much earlier age. We don't want to leave the intervention simply to higher education. And obviously, as John said, to partner with all of the other institutions in building a robust capability where the unique expertise that each of us brings to the table actually exists in support of each other rather than from a competitive standpoint. This has just been an absolute delight from our perspective in terms of the welcome, the aspirations that exist in Abu Dhabi, the capability that exists to be able to articulate that vision. And so we very much look forward to welcoming a class of 200 undergraduates and 50 graduate students next fall, assuming all of the Educational Council and ministry activities are supportive.
That sounds very exciting.
Can I tell you it wasn't approved?
Well, let me have another speech here for you.
That's actually after I no longer could have John editing my legal papers. I actually left the law and went into business, and my company actually sent me to Babson for a program, so I'm in your debt for that. We have a relatively little amount of time left, and I want to give an opportunity to the audience, but I want to ask just sort of a general question, and then any of you could comment on that. In the context of innovation, one of the things, and we've been hearing about it yesterday, that is clearly very important is getting people to be willing, if you will, to rebel, to sort of to break the china, to be almost explicitly disrespectful of authority, to have complete freedom to ask the unaskable questions. And how does that fit into a country or a culture that might be perceived to be more conservative than other cultures? I mean, and John, I mean, or anybody can address this. It's really one of the fascinating tensions that I think is apparent, or that to people from the outside, because the vision is extraordinary, but is there any tension, or in fact is this welcomed?
So I'll begin to speak to that. Elliot knows that I think I'm the only university president that teaches a full faculty schedule, and this academic year I'm teaching 4 courses. 3 of them are the same core material. They're on the relationship of religion and government. I'm teaching 1 section to freshmen in New York, 1 section to the new freshmen here that are NYU students, and 1 section to my Emirati students. And I start that class by saying that more than learning about the American Constitution or skills of interpretation of exegetical reasoning, I want my students in all 3 of those sections to learn what I call a healthy disrespect for authority. And they read unedited United States Supreme Court opinions about the relationship of religion and law. That's our laboratory frog, as I say. But one of the reasons that's a good vehicle for inculcating this is not only does it teach them close reading, but the justices are disagreeing with each other. Mm-hmm. And we're free to disagree and evaluate the opinions. I mean, the role of a law professor is to shame and honor.
So are those 3 classes different in their responses to this?
It's very, very interesting. They are encouraged, of course, first and foremost, to disrespect my opinions, by which I mean, I said a healthy disrespect for authority. They have to, there are 2 maxims in the class, and this goes back to the liberal arts education idea. The fact that we want to create for the world T-shaped people that are deep in their discipline, but are broad in their understanding as human beings. Okay, so we reject diktat. I speak here as a Catholic. We don't accept things that are said ex cathedra on the one hand. On the other hand, we don't collapse into everybody's entitled to an opinion. You're not entitled to an opinion that the world is flat. Thank you very much. So you have to have a reason and be willing to listen to the other side. So and I find that, if anything, my Emirati students, these women especially, get that more quickly even than the American students do, because the American students are kind of adolescent in their disrespect for authority.
I know what that means.
The students that come from around the world that David and I are teaching come with such listening capacity because they come with this cosmopolitan gene. They've been attracted by each other. They're smart as anyone. I mean, the median student speaks 4 languages. Their SAT scores are as good as Harvard's. But they come with this cosmopolitan ecumenism almost that they take to it. But of the 3 groups, the group that takes to it best, I find, are the Emirati.
That's remarkable. Ladies and gentlemen, questions, please. And ask for the microphone and just give us your name and a short question. Yes.
Thank you very much. Azim Ibrahim. One of the most ambitious education initiatives in this part of the world has been the cost in Saudi Arabia. But despite the multi-billion-dollar investment, it has failed to attract the Premier League academics from around the world that they were hoping for. And I remember asking my supervisor at Cambridge, and I've had the great privilege of attending the leading institutions on both sides of the Atlantic. I remember asking him that when he is going to move to the United States and get a 6-figure salary and have a unlimited research budget. And he said, he said Cambridge will always attract those that are interested in ideas rather than those that are interested in driving a big car. And so despite the huge disparity in investment between UK and American institutions, Cambridge is continuously ranked at number 1 and number 2 in international rankings. So my question is that how do you attract the Premier League academics from around the world, the Premier League thinkers, when the primary motivation is simply to be in an environment in which they are around other great thinkers of a similar caliber?
Let me address that question. Because, first of all, thank you for this question. This question is at the heart of the higher education strategy for Abu Dhabi. Attracting quality faculty, quality scientists, has a lot to do with what I would call the hardware, the research labs, the research ecosystem, and some of the softer issues, like the kinds of contracts that are under, the visa issues, residency issues. Scientists are quite different from others in that they tend to want to stay for long periods of time in a given job, in a given place. So you want to make it attractive for them to be able to have a long-term career. Certainly, we could, in Abu Dhabi, we could supply the hardware. And we are now looking at what we can do on the software side. I think if you look at the higher education strategy that we announced back in April, you'll be reassured that we have tackled both. We are very serious about building an appropriate research system and R&D environment that would attract and keep some of the best scientists that are around the world. Otherwise, we will not be able to achieve what we want to achieve.
Let me be very concrete in answering your question, because the fact of the matter is that in the initial faculty for the first year at NYU, we have attracted people from Cambridge. And we only want Premier League players for the school that we're building. Your intuition is completely correct. Believe me, at a school with a $50,000 per student endowment, whose peer schools have $1 million and $2 million per student endowments, I know it's a doomed strategy if you try to do it with money. Okay? And frankly, there was a flaw in the Kaus strategy in that they were using essentially search engines who had a conflict of interest. You're going to get the wait list if you ask somebody else to do your recruiting after they do their recruiting. Okay? That's inherent in the system. Now, how much you pay? But the fact of the matter is, if you build what people like me want. I mean, I spent 100 hours a week for 15 years teaching for nothing because of the reward of the thought, the research, and the teaching. That's what your Cambridge meant. It really, really meant. So you've got to create that environment. That means things like cluster hiring. That means PhD students, being able to get the best PhD students. But you cannot start with a wait list strategy. If you don't say, we're going to get a faculty here that 5 or 10 years from now, Cambridge is going to be seeking to raid, but they're going to be saying, no, I'm staying in Abu Dhabi. Okay? And this goes back to my earlier point. The instantation, what we're using is the architecture. So we've got the Courant Institute of Mathematics at NYU. The Abel Award, which is the Nobel Prize in Math, has only been given 7 times the last 7 years. 3 to 7 times NYU faculty have won it. We have a very strong applied math department. Okay? A lot of the applied mathematicians in the world that are at the very, very top, your Premier League players, are Chinese. Many of them are expatriate Chinese. If we're recruiting against Caltech and Princeton for one of those people, and I can say that in our Mobius strip, 1 out of every 4 years, you can be in Shanghai near your parents, that's a plus. If Alec Morantz wants to do languages that he can't find so easily in New York as he can find here, and we can put a machine here for him, he'll come here. You're not bidding for them with dollars. You're bidding for them with a comparative advantage that captures this flow of talent. And I think that's something Abu Dhabi has going.
John, I think the principal issue here is not just how to attract them to come, but how to keep them.
That's right.
This is the challenge.
Exactly.
How to keep them over a long time.
Oh, another question. So we have us here in the front row. Could just wait for the microphone because we're filming this.
Thank you, Robert Wexler, to President Sexton and President Schlesinger. And this has been fascinating, just absolutely fascinating and hopeful. And I thank you for all 5 gentlemen for what you've provided this morning. If I may ask, given the strategies that you have employed for your unique institutions, apply that, if you could, if you think it's appropriate, to what President Obama attempted to do in Cairo and is now seeking to implement. The strategies you've employed at your universities, can they be employed in a more nationalistic way so as to assist the United States in its effort to reach out to the Islamic world in a more constructive and mutually beneficial way? Is there a strategy to employ that you've employed in your institutions in a national way?
Thank you, Congressman. It's a wonderful
I'm
question.
a little biased. I'm quite biased positively. My provost and I were the prime U.S.-based academic resources to the White House for the Entrepreneurship Summit. So we start with a very simple point of view that argues empirically that entrepreneurial activity is at the hub of it's the most powerful force of economic and social value creation on a global scale. And that's a fact. It's not hyperbole. And as a consequence, the ability to be able to figure out across the Muslim communities of the world the basic strategies that are incredibly sensitive to local context, just as we've been talking about here, but absolutely are capable of being able to blend tops-down institutional planning with bottoms-up activity among the population, is at the core of what I believe will generate both incredible economic and social value on a long-term basis. And it is that kind of activity that certainly drives our agenda as an institution, but more importantly, my own work personally around these kinds of issues.
I was in a conversation with a head of state whose polls were in the tank, and I used the phrase that this concept we've been talking about of the fluidity of talent operates beyond sovereignty. And he said, I love that phrase. I said, that's why your polls are in the tank. I said, it's okay for a university president to talk beyond sovereignty, but not a head of state. And he taught me something. He said, you're wrong. You're wrong. This flow is going to happen. The question is, will we be connected to it and a keynote in it? And I think that's the answer.
I think we have time for one more question.
That's an important point.
Yes.
I don't think that the American universities have to be here for any particular purpose. They have to be here to offer what they know how to do, which is education. If we do the right thing the way that we know how to do it, this part of the world will be more receptive than if we try to pretend that we are here for some other reasons. No, we are here to educate the people. And the educated people, I believe, will be more understanding of the issues that you are of concern than uneducated person.
So I'm Deborah Wood-Smith, and I want to congratulate the panel because we're talking about innovation, and you all are innovators in creating together this new curriculum for the 21st century. So I have a question and a thought. You know, the idea that we need artists who think like engineers and engineers who think like artists. And I haven't really heard you talk about how you fuse by design the hardcore science and engineering with the arts, the humanities, and social sciences. And quite frankly, I'll be a little provocative and say the only place in the United States where I really see that going on by design and structure is at the Naval Academy, where everyone ends up with a full engineering degree, but they now have created something called LRIC, language, regional expertise, and culture that's fused with STEM. This would be fantastic as a thought for you all to kind of carry that into what you've said this morning. Comment, please.
At the level of support for your comment, we have the benefit in Wellesley, again, being a small school, of sharing a campus with the Olin College of Engineering, which represents a very similar kind of view toward engineering education as we represent towards business education, very much kind of learning by doing. And Wellesley College, one of the great liberal arts institutions certainly in the world. And recognizing exactly what you're talking about, the three presidents who actually teach together signed a set of activities and a proclamation about a year and a half ago that essentially ties the three schools together for all of the both co-curricular activity but all of the extracurricular activity in terms of representing that our students at Babson get access to one of the great liberal arts schools and one of the great technology schools, Olin in turn for business and liberal arts, and Wellesley very much for business and for technology support. And it recognizes, again, within the confines of the American higher education model, that we have three great schools that are essentially non-competitive in every respect, that benefit enormously from the existence of each other within a mile of each other, and that we can actually turn into a greater whole. Those are the kinds of models that are generally absent from much of American higher education across universities and are embedded in your fundamental logic of recognizing that for us just to do business would be doing a serious disservice to our students.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me again, on behalf of all of you, thank these five gentlemen for our presentation this morning. Thank you. I think we have a break now, is that right?